Well, hey, we're talking about the climb today, and I'll dive into what that means in a little bit. We're kicking off a new sermon series. But as we're talking about this, I've been thinking about mountains a lot. And I've actually been thinking about one of my most memorable times in the mountains. I was in 7th grade, and it was a ski trip, a church ski trip. And Danielle, actually, I think you were on that ski trip, so don't give away any of the parts of this. But I was on a church ski trip, and our church took a busload or a couple busloads full of kids and sent them west to Colorado. And we got to just go have fun, and it was a great trip for the weekend. It was a long, like 4-day weekend, and so we got to spend some time going down the mountains and just having a great, enjoyable time. I say it was fun for us kids. I think for our youth pastor, it was probably terrifying. And for the staff at the mountain, it was absolutely overwhelming. Because, see, we were one church that dropped a whole bunch of kids off, but as we were doing that, we saw bus after bus after bus of other churches with the exact same idea. And so when we got there, the day was absolutely packed. And so to manage the chaos somewhat, our youth pastor grabs us and has a conversation. And she kind of gathers us all around. Her name is Stephanie, and she's awesome. And she says, hey, a couple rules so that we can kind of manage the chaos of hundreds of kids loose on this mountain. 1, always stay in groups. Always good advice, right? Always in life, stay in groups. 2, don't go down a run that is kind of beyond your ability. So how many of you have ever skied before or snowboarded or been on a, okay, about half. So for those of you that haven't, skiing, they have different grades for different runs. And they go off a color system. So the easiest runs are greens. And greens are pretty simple, right? Greens are kind of like where you want to start if you've never been skiing before. Greens are gentle, and they're not really aggressive. They're not really sloped too well. Then you have the slightly more aggressive blues, and blues are the intermediate. They're where you go if maybe you've skied a day or two before and you want something that's a little bit of a challenge. A blue is a little steeper, it's a little faster, it's a little more dangerous, but it's also a little more fun. And then you have the black diamonds. And those are the steepest, the hardest, the most aggressive of all the ski runs. Those are the ones that have the sharpest pitch and the most obstacles, but they're also the fastest and the most enjoyable. And so, our youth pastor was saying, there's these different grades for runs, and if this is your first time here, stay to the easy stuff, and if you need to go harder, or if you've been skiing before, you can go a little harder. And so that was good advice, and the most important part came last. You need to check in with me every couple hours to make sure that you're okay. There's hundreds of youth out here, not just mine. I want to make sure that everybody's okay. So every couple hours, come down to the lodge and just, wave and say, hi, I'm still in one piece. We're good. So good advice. Off we went. My buddy Brad and I grabbed another person, and we wanted to race some aggressive stuff. We'd both been skiing before. We were both middle school boys who thought that we were indestructible, and we were pretty sure that fast equals good, and we wanted the fastest run we could find. And so we get to the base of the lift line, and we're waiting there for what feels like our entire lives, waiting to get to the front of it. We finally fight through the line and get on the lift and up to the top of the mountain, and we just want to go fast. Right? We dealt with a whole 10-hour bus ride to get here. We dealt with what felt like a 10-hour line down below to get to the top, and now we want to race. And as we look out from the very top of the mountain, we can see in front of us that every single one of these runs is completely packed. Like there's all these kids here, and all of them have packed out all the runs, and they're crashing into each other, and even the greens look dangerous because kids are smashing into each other and they're bouncing off each other. And so we're thinking, we want to go fast. There's no way we can do that on these runs. We're going to get hit by somebody, whether or not it's our fault. It's just not going to work. And so we start to plot, and we start to scheme. Some of you who have middle school boys, you know what that looks like. And we look, and we see at the top of the mountain, there's this big sign that has all the runs, and we can see all the runs on it, and every single one we can see from our place, and all of them are packed. But we see just past this sign, there's a whole nother side of the mountain. And, it's just kind of grayed out on the sign. There's no runs on it, but we can see that there's also no people on it. And we look, and, it turns out when it snows on that side of the mountain just as much as this side of the mountain. And the powder looks really good, and it's sunny, and it's bright, and, it can't be that much worse than this side, right? Like, mountains are pretty symmetrical, or at least that was our thinking. And so what happens if we go down that one, right? What happens if we go down the backside? There's no people there, so we're kind of rationalizing to ourselves, this is going to be safer. Going down the backside, the untamed side of the mountain, because there's nobody there to run into, is going to be a safer option, right, than going down the greens. I loved being a middle school boy. So we look at the top, and we're looking on the map, and we realize that, we've got to go kind of quick because we've got to get down to the bottom. And conveniently, just at the base of the backside of the mountain, all that grayed out area that's not part of the ski slope, there's this big black line that runs all the way around the mountain right back to the lodge. And you know, black lines are supposed to be black diamonds. That's how they work on ski maps. And so we're thinking in our heads, this is great. We'll go down this completely uninhabited back bowl. It'll be great. We'll have all the powder in the world to ourselves. And then we'll hit a black diamond. It'll be real fast and easy all the way back down and just to the lodge where we need it. And we check our watches, and it's like, oh, well, we got to go kind of fast. So this is the best possible way, right? So what do? Exactly what you would expect. We kind of side slide to the nice rope area that says ski area boundary, and we decide that that's really good advice for everyone else to follow, and we slide underneath. This is the part of the service at the other two that every parent has looked at their kid and say, don't do what that guy does. Good advice. So we slide underneath, and we start down the back bowl. And we think we'll just go down the back bowl for a little bit, and then we'll hit that black diamond, and it'll run us all the way down to the lodge. We've got to go kind of quick, but we'll be fine. And for the first 30 feet, 30 yards, it's great. It's perfect. There's nice deep powder. The sun is shining. There is perfectly not another person in sight. It's incredible. And we're heading down, and things are great. And then the mountain dips a little bit, and we can see for the first time, and up ahead there's a tree line. And it's not terrible yet. It just, some trees. And Brad and I are both really good skiers. We normally don't fall down the whole time we're there. My parents have taken me skiing a lot, and so I'm thinking this is great. Like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll just kind of go carefully, and we'll be okay. Until we hit the trees. And we realize that this part of the mountain has literally never been groomed before. Not since God built this mountain a way long time ago, right? So there's lots of rocks that I'm not really hoping for. There's lots of trees and roots that are all over the place. We get in there and we go from, sprinting full speed down, enjoying ourselves, to the point where my dad's back there looking at me. He hasn't heard this story before. Love you, Dad. So we're kind of weaving through slowly, and we slow down. We did slow down, but not because we wanted to. Because it became very quick and very apparent that we had to. We went from, pointing our skis straight down the mountain and just full tuck, full speed all the way down, to really quick realizing that wasn't going to be a possibility. We were falling about every 10 to 15 feet. We got to the point where I go from full out aggressive skiing to like pizza-ing my skis and kind of falling down a lot and hoping that I don't show too much fear to my friend as he does the exact same thing. It was terrifying. That fear began to build more and more and more as we realized maybe this route was a little more than we expected. We didn't really bite off all of this, right? As we begin to realize that we're going a little slower than we planned, and it doesn't feel like we're going to make it back to the lodge in time, no matter how fast that black diamond is. And finally, as we look around and realize we haven't seen another set of ski tracks since we started. And as it began to hit home with us, really what it means to be all alone on the back of a mountain. So we're trying to balance our terror and our need to go fast to get down in time with our desire to go slow and get down safely. And we fell more than we skied. We slipped and we slid, and at times we even had to walk to get farther and farther and farther down. And the whole time in the back of our heads is this thought, soon we'll be at the black diamond, soon we'll just run all the way through, soon it'll be fast and easy and relatively smooth back to the base. And that's our hope. That's what we're looking for, that route that's going to take us back to where we want to be, and we're excited and we're great, and it's going to be the perfect route that gets us back to our starting place. It's going to be beautiful. And finally, we begin to see the hints of it up ahead. Through the trees, we can see the light beginning to break, and we know that that's got to be the route. That's got to be the nice, fast run that's going to get us back to the lodge, and we get closer and closer, and we fall and we roll, and we finally hit the tree line and realize that on any ski map, black lines are used for two things. They're used for black diamonds. They're also used for highways. This was not a ski run that was going to take us all the way back to the beginning of the mountain. This was the road that we'd taken on our bus on the way in that morning. And conveniently enough, it was not a fast, quick run all the way back down to the lodge. There was a cross-country skiing path next to it that was 2 miles long and perfectly flat the entire way. Anybody ever done cross-country skiing? Yeah, it's hard, right? Yeah. So when you cross-country ski, you have these great lightweight skis that are built kind of different, and you kind of go about things differently. We didn't have all that. So we spent 2 miles trying to cross-country ski, something that I had no idea how to do, to make it back to our checkpoint. That route that we depended on to be nice and quick and easy to get back to where we started was not the route. that we needed. We might have missed our check-in time a little bit at the lodge. We finally get back, and I learned a few things. One, I learned that I never want to go cross-country skiing again. Not going to happen. Two, I learned that youth pastors really love their youth. And when you worry them, because you're not on the mountain that you're supposed to be on, and they've been panicking for 2 hours, even loving youth pastors can be not so nice people. And I also learned how important it is to find the right route. I learned that your route in life matters a lot more than your intent in life. See, our intent, and we tried to explain this to our youth pastor, our intent had been good. We were going to find a quick, easy path, we thought, down the backside, and then a quick, easy black diamond down to the front. We had a great intent. We were going to be there on time. But we picked a route that made that impossible. In life, we find, not just in skiing, that your route, not your intent, determines where you arrive. Route trumps intent. This is true in every area of your life. Even if you don't believe in God, this is just good biblical principles that help, that apply. Our route trumps our intent when it comes to our relationships. And many of us, we all want to have good relationships with our friends and our family and our spouses, right? I've never sat down with a couple for premarital counseling and asked them, what's your intent for your marriage? And they said, we'd really like to have an average marriage. Like, we want to be just kind of like moderately in love with each other in about 20 years. Nobody has ever said they want an average marriage. But somewhere along the way, our route looks like a little too much TV and a little too little conversation. And little by little, that route takes us one way that might be different from the intent. We see this in other areas of our life. We see it in our finances. And everybody wants to have healthy finances, but sometimes, somewhere along the way, things fall apart. And our intent is good, but our route looks like more spending than saving, and little by little, our route takes us away from our goal. For young people struggling with our identity, with what they're going to do in the future, there's an intent to know who you are and what God has called you to do. But if your route doesn't look like trying things out and pursuing and attempting internships, your route won't take you to your intent. This is true with your health. It's true with your hygiene. I'm embarrassed to admit how many times my intent has been to floss more. I stuck a nice little tub of floss right next to my sink thinking that I would do that, and that was a year ago. That was my intent. You know how many times I've used that floss? I still brush my teeth. It's okay. Do you know how many times I've used that floss since I had that intent? One time, and it was after I wrote that sentence and I felt guilty. Your route matters more than your intent. And that's doubly true in our spiritual lives. See, I think everybody would love to have a life full of joy and hope. I think, and I'm willing to guess, that there's something that brought you here, and part of it is that intent that you would feel God's presence in your life. That's our intent. But what's going to determine whether or not that happens is our route. It's our actions and where we go and what happens that brings us there. The prophet Isaiah talks about this, and he uses the analogy of climbing a mountain, of going up to where God is. This is Isaiah 2, when Isaiah tells the people of God, come, let us go up to the Lord's mountain, to the house of Jacob's God, so that he may teach us his ways and we may walk in God's paths. Let us go up to God's mountain. Let us take the route that takes us up to God's mountain. You notice he says not you should love God. I mean, that's a good idea, but he doesn't say you should do it. He said you should take the route to do it. In the ancient world, there was this belief that whatever God you worshiped probably lived on top of a mountain. So for the Greeks, it was Mount Olympus. For the Middle Eastern religions, it was the Babylonian ziggurats. For the Hindus, it was Mount Kailash. For the Jews, they believed that God was most present in Mount Zion. That this was a mountain in the middle of Jerusalem where God was able to be found. It was precious to God. Now, God lived everywhere and God made everything, but this was one place you could go and encounter the presence of God. And Isaiah invites people, come, let us go up to God's mountain. I think this is the invitation to us. This is part of what we try to do as a church. This is something that every week we're pursuing. What is it that will take us closer to the presence of God, into the presence of God on the route that leads us closer to God? The first question remains, which mountain are we going to climb? See, we all climb mountains in life. Whether we mean to or not, I mean, that's my kind of metaphorical language, but we all climb mountains. Sometimes it's corporate ladders. And we spend lots of hours at work. Sometimes we love our job, sometimes we don't, but that's someplace we spend our effort. That's the route we choose to take. Sometimes the mountain we choose is our social hierarchy. And we want to have more friends or more likes or more party invites. And so we spend time with people, some that we love and some that, well, we just love what they can bring to us. Sometimes it's academic ladders. Sometimes it's to that goal of being the smartest person in the room, or sometimes it's the best family in the room. We climb mountains. It's part of what we do. One of the core beliefs of our faith is that God calls us to climb a specific mountain, that God has a route for us, that God invites us to a way of living, that we don't just exist and are born and die without ever changing our actions, but instead God calls us to live a specific way. This is one of the key beliefs of the faith. This is something that we believe strongly in, that every single week we believe we're called to pursue. We call this discipleship. It's the idea that God has a plan for how we would live, or at least a desire, and that we're invited, not forced, but we're invited to follow that. And at the top, we find ourselves a little closer to God's presence. And every step along the way, we move closer and closer to the life of God. We're kicking off a new series today called The Climb, and we're going to talk about this for the next couple weeks. We're going to talk about just the basic idea that we are moving closer to God and that God is inviting us to move closer to Him. So over the next couple weeks, we're going to look at practical steps. Today, we're just laying the foundation for this idea that God has a route that's different for our lives than what we might choose otherwise. Our hope is that at the end of this series, you're going to better understand the life of Christ and better understand what it might look like to take one step that way. Because there are times that we choose other routes too. Sometimes it's hard to do what God asks us to do or invites us to do. I'll confess it's been hard at times in 2016 and now in 2017 to love enemies. It's been hard at times to pray for those who persecute you. It's hard to turn the other cheek. It's hard at times to have joy despite all circumstances, but those are the things to which God calls us. They're just hard things sometimes. Sometimes this is a hard route to choose. I feel the tension to turn my back on this route. I'll admit this every single day, or pretty much every day. Some of you know, I've told you before, the first thing I do in the morning is pray. And I get up and pray, and every single day still, there's that little voice in the back of my head that says, you could probably hit the snooze button, and you'd only miss a few minutes of prayer time, but it's Sunday, and you're going to pray anyways, and you're a pastor, so you pray a lot. So that goes through my head every single day. That's one of the times that I get to choose which route am I going to take, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect. Some of you know what that feels like in other different ways as we choose which route am I going to take today. It's a route that can be tiring, a route that's outside of our comfort zone, and a route that takes effort. But it's not just our own effort. The cool thing about this mountain is that we never climb it alone. We believe that God walks with us through it every step of the way. And here's how I understand that. We talk about the Holy Spirit and God's presence within us, lifting us up to closer to God than we might do otherwise. I think about the people I know in my life that kind of live like saints. Imagine the people that really are that example for you of what faith looks like. I think we've all got someone that we can think of. Do you think they were born that way? Or do you think somewhere along the way they started walking a little closer to God and found something that helped them along the path? I think there are lives of people in our midst. Maybe it's your life group leader, your Sunday school teacher, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's your spouse, whose lives answer that it is possible to climb this mountain. And that there is a change that comes in the pursuing of this route. We don't climb alone. So is it worth it? Solomon, the wisest guy who ever lives, talks about this in Proverbs 4:18. He talks about this path when he says, "The way of the righteous is like morning light that gets brighter and brighter until it's full day." The way of the righteous is morning light, brighter and brighter until it is full day. That's hopeful. We spent the last month talking about awkward conversations and the painful places where we think we need more grace in the world. And there's hope in the thought that there might be a way that we can have that grace. The way of the righteous is morning light, brighter and brighter until it is full day. When I think about this, I think about the people who I see live this out. And I think about, in this case, my grandparents. Specifically, my grandfather, the one who is in the hospital right now. See, he's been through a lot in his life. He survived the Great Depression, and then he fought in World War II in the Navy. He dealt with the social upheaval of the 60s and 70s. He worked hard every day of his life. He dealt with the tech boom of the 80s and 90s at a later stage in life when most people weren't picking up technology. He's not crazy about the computer, but he deals with it. Through it all, he's grown more joyful, not less. So a few days ago, actually a little over a week ago, when I went to visit him in the ER and we weren't quite sure how he was doing, I wasn't even close to his room yet when I could hear his laugh as he was joking with the nurse that was talking about what might be final life questions. They were trying to figure out what was wrong with him and what might happen to him in the future. And even in the midst of that, he's smiling. Not even the specter of death could scare away his joy. That's a different way to look at things that doesn't come normally. But it's that process that comes from following a righteous path that gets brighter and brighter until it is full day. The route we pick in life is really important. We all pick one. Some of us pick several, and that's okay. But over the next few weeks, we're going to look at tangible ways that we can pursue this route that God put before us, to grow closer to God, to do what we can, to try as hard as we can, and to know that God is reaching back to us and pulling us up in this beautiful thing called discipleship, this relationship with God. My hope is that this is something that practically helps us, that inspires us, and that changes us, so that we might make the world a little bit brighter and brighter until it is full day.